Welcome to the 3x5 news, views, and reviews. Scribble and index cards. We get in and we get out fast, so keep up. Donald Trump was born, if that term can be applied, when a cloven-hoofed creature closed itself out of a human female on June 15th, 1946. That's Gemini, like me, but unlike me, he is a Gemini on steroids. A walking embodiment of the worst traits of Gemini, as summed up by perplexity, indecisive and inconsistent. Impulsive, restless and easily bored, two-faced or deceitful, moody, immature and childish, self-centered and arrogant, unapologetic. In other words, the man is an astrological nightmare. All astrology aside, Trump is a madman. But wait, that can be a good thing when it comes to the leader of a nation, right? Many of you may be too young to remember, but the U.S. elected this guy, Richard Nixon, president in 1968. Heretofore the model for a sinister president until Trump overshadowed him, Nixon made the Madman Theory famous. The idea behind that was to make him appear erratic and unstable to our designated enemies such as North Vietnam and the Soviet Union. Many of you may also be too young to remember that Russia was once our mortal enemy, or even too old. It's weird how many people 8 decades long, such as myself, are okay with Trump basically giving Russia favored nation status. They seem to think that once Russia abandoned communism, it became acceptable. But in truth, it's now worse than it was when it was communist. Anyway, to make himself seem mad, Nixon ordered U.S. nuclear forces put on high alert and nuclear-armed bombers to fly near Soviet airspace. To elaborate, the so-called logic was that if your enemies think you might do something extreme, they will be more likely to backpedal. But the trouble with the madman theory is that, conversely, if your enemy really thinks you're about to attack, they may attack first. In other words, instead of deterrence, it can cause escalation. The madman theory is even less likely to work when the leader in question is an actual madman like Trump. With Nixon, the madman theory was deliberate and behind the scenes, a strategy, whereas Trump's version of the madman theory, as explained by ChatGPT edited, isn't, quote, a calculated strategy so much as a natural outgrowth of his impulsive communication style, which includes erratic tweets, sudden policy reversals, and inflammatory rhetoric, unquote. An example of Trump and madman theory occurred in 2017 when he threatened North Korea with, quote, fire and fury like the world has never seen, unquote. Then, of course, there's his volatility and capriciousness with tariffs. In both instances, again, according to ChatGPT, open quote, sudden decisions sometimes gain concessions, but just as often created confusion and distrust. End quote. Never mind madman theory. Trump went full madman in February this year when he went ballistic on Ukraine President Zelensky in the Oval Office. Nixon had many negative qualities. They were legion, in fact, such as paranoia and keeping an enemies list. But unlike Trump, he could best be described as mentally ill, whereas Trump seems to be doing his level best to escalate his inherent sociopathy to psychopathy. To reiterate, he is not just someone who plays one on TV, but a real madman. Lately, though, we are seeing him attempt to act like an actual statesman. No easy task, considering that he doesn't have the attention span or actual interest to devise strategy or even listen to those helping him with it. So he's a tactics guy, not a strategy guy. What's wrong with that? But tactics, like strategy, are usually created in advance. They are not just impromptu reactions to the events of the day, as with Trump. A prime example of that was how friendly he was with Putin at the Alaska summit. Trump had been brought around to Ukraine's request for a ceasefire, as opposed to working toward, as Russia favored, a broader peace agreement. A ceasefire means that a halt to their fighting, however temporary, is immediate. The so-called broader peace agreement calls for continuing to fight until a peace agreement can be reached, which can take months or years, punctuated by the deaths of many Ukrainians, not to mention wretched Russians used as cannon fodder. But while speaking with Putin in Alaska, Trump did an about-face from advocating a ceasefire to working toward the dreaded broader peace agreement, getting nothing in return. How can you be a statesman if no one trusts you? As a statesman, your word is your currency. Trump's is fool's gold. His credibility is absolutely zero. Then came Monday's rematch in the Oval Office with Zelensky, as well as the European leaders who accompanied him. The next day, a New York Times headline asked, "Can Zelensky trust Trump?" Everyone was cautiously optimistic that Trump seemed to pivot from a position that Ukrainian security was a European issue to, on behalf of the U.S., offering Ukraine the vaunted security guarantees. However, characteristic of a Gemini, what those might look like were vague and undefined, left analysts to speculate. In Political, Nahal Tusi wrote, edited, quote, "Many Ukrainians watch, knowing that he may not keep his word, but Trump's mere openness to a security guarantee for Ukraine is viewed as a huge win," close quote. For Kiev, she wrote, open quote, "The diplomatic field is arguably more unpredictable than the battlefield," unquote. Come to think of it, in its decisiveness, minus the threats, maybe this is still the Madman Theory, but Madman light. After the summit, historian Timothy Snyder wrote that among his principles of negotiation, quote, "Concessions shouldn't be made in advance, for nothing, or on behalf of others without their agreement," end quote. It might seem obvious to you or I, but Trump is ignorant of each of these. In fact, he's such a poor negotiator, one wonders how he made successful deals while still just a businessman. Oh, that's right, he didn't. Instead, he squandered his father's fortune. I recently saw an estimate of how much he would have made if he just invested that money. That sum was astronomical, as opposed to astrological. Also, he drove Skady 8 businesses into the ground and became a repeat offender at bankruptcy. That is, until The Apprentice rescued him, and later his people jumped on the crypto craze as a way for his subjects to pay tribute to him. In an aside to President Emmanuel Macron of France on Monday, caught on an open microphone, Trump said of Putin, quote, "I think he wants to make a deal for me, you understand, as crazy as it sounds," unquote. Imagine thinking that after his interaction with Putin at Anchorage, which left even Trump looking dejected. Along with psychopathy, add delusional to Trump's catalog of symptoms.